Before the story begins, please write in the comment section where you are tuning in from today. Do not forget to like and subscribe so this channel can continue to grow and present even more engaging stories. Morning at the residence of Sophia and Hudson always began with the exact same ritual. It was a well-ordered symphony of established success. The rich aroma of freshly ground Arabica coffee drifted from the automated espresso machine in the corner of their gourmet kitchen, blending with the scent of toasted artisanal bread prepared by their live-in housekeeper. Sophia, wearing a tailored cream powers suit that complemented her figure flawlessly, reviewed several corporate emails on her tablet while sitting at the Italian marble kitchen island. Across from her, Hudson, looking sharp in a sky-blue dress shirt and a matching silk tie, placed a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice beside Sophia's hand. He told her not to work too hard and reminded her to eat her breakfast first, offering the warm smile that always managed to melt her heart. Even amidst the heaviest corporate pressure, Sophia looked up and smiled back. She thanked him, telling him he was the best husband a woman could ask for, and set her tablet aside. To the outside world, Sophia was a formidable CEO, a ruthless businesswoman who had built her corporate empire from scratch. Yet inside this home, in front of Hudson, she was a wife who cherished feeling loved and protected. She had given Hudson the position of marketing manager at one of her subsidiary companies, not out of favoritism, but because she genuinely believed in her husband's capabilities. She wanted them to build their future together as an equal team. Sophia announced that she needed to head out for a critical board meeting with her executive directors. After finishing her breakfast, she stood up, and Hudson immediately stepped behind her, gently holding her tailored blazer to help her put it on. He whispered for her to drive safely and asked her to text him once she arrived at the corporate headquarters, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. It was a small gesture that, to Sophia, served as constant reassurance that she had married the right man. She gripped the leather steering wheel of her white luxury sports car, driving out past the tall privacy gates of their estate with a profound sense of peace. She had no idea that this peace was merely a fragile veneer covering a dark abyss ready to swallow her whole. Upon arriving at the corporate offices, Hudson was no longer the sweet, doting husband serving orange juice in the morning. He was Mr. Hudson, a respected marketing manager who maintained a professional distance from his subordinates. Everyone acknowledged his competence, but the entire staff also knew that his rapid rise was largely facilitated by his status as the husband of the company's sole owner. This unspoken reality quietly gnawed at his male ego, a fact he refused to admit even to himself. That was where Haley entered his world. Haley was a new entry-level hirer on his marketing team, a young woman from a small Midwestern town who dressed modestly and carried eyes that seemed to bear the weight of the world. She was not the type of woman who would turn heads at a party, but she possessed a subtle fragility that somehow drew Hudson's attention. She was frequently seen eating cheap packed lunches by herself in the break room, letting out heavy sighs whenever she looked at her direct deposit payubs. Initially, Hudson did not pay much attention to her until the day Haley made a catastrophic error on a major financial projection report. The entire department was thrown into panic. Haley stood before Hudson's executive desk, her head bowed low, bracing herself for the worst reprimand of her career. Tears were already welling up in her eyes as she apologized with a trembling voice, admitting her lack of attention to detail and stating she was ready to accept whatever termination or penalty followed. Hudson looked up at her. Something unexplainable shifted inside him. Instead of erupting in anger, he felt a sudden wave of pity and protectiveness. He did not see an incompetent employee. He saw a vulnerable, broken girl. He spoke in a voice far softer than he intended, telling her to stop crying and offering to fix the entire report together. They worked late overtime together that evening. Hudson patiently pointed out every spreadsheet error and guided her through correcting each detail. In the quiet solitude of the empty office building, Haley began to open up about her personal struggles. She spoke of her chronically ill mother back in Ohio, her younger brother who needed tuition money for state college, and how deeply grateful she was to have secured this corporate job. She looked at Hudson with shimmering eyes full of genuine adoration, telling him how incredibly kind he was and claiming she had no idea how to ever repay him. It was a completely different kind of admiration than what he normally received. It was not respect for his marital status or wealth but worship of him as an individual hero. Hudson's long-suppressed ego felt as though it had been drenched in cool, refreshing water. For the first time in years he felt like a savior. That late-night incident opened a dangerous door. Haley began seeking out Hudson's advice on a daily basis, and Hudson always made time for her. Their conversations gradually shifted from marketing strategies to intimate personal matters. One afternoon, Hudson noticed Haley eating a sad meal of plain white rice and canned beans. Without a second thought, he instructed her to grab her coat so he could take her out to a real lunch. Haley politely tried to decline, claiming she did not want to be a burden, but Hudson firmly refused to take no for an answer, framing it as a manager rewarding an employee's hard work. At a cozy downtown bistro, Haley ate ravenously, while Hudson watched her in silence. A strange sensation spread through his chest, a deep urge to provide, protect, and shelter her. Over lunch, Haley spoke again about the harsh realities of her life, admitting how jealous she felt watching other girls her age buy nice designer clothes or hang out at trendy coffee shops without worrying about bank balances. She smiled bitterly, saying she never asked for luxury, just enough money to send home for her mother's medical bills. Hearing this, Hudson felt that his own world of extreme luxury provided entirely by Sophia's wealth was grossly unfair. In Haley's presence he felt larger, wealthier, and far more important than he ever felt at home. He paid the lunch tab with a flourish, feeling every bit the generous philanthropist. That evening, Sophia planned a romantic celebration dinner at one of Manhattan's most exclusive five-star restaurants to toast the successful launch of her latest corporate acquisition. She looked stunning in a burgundy evening gown, while Hudson cut a handsome figure in his tailored suit, reaching across the table covered in scattered rose petals. Hudson held his wife's hands and praised her exceptional brilliance, telling her how proud he was of her accomplishments. Sophia beamed with happiness, replying that they were an unstoppable team. They discussed upcoming summer vacation plans in Europe and debated landscape designs for the backyard renovation of their estate. Everything seemed picture perfect. Yet, right in the middle of their conversation, Hudson's smartphone, resting on the white tablecloth next to his plate, vibrated softly. A message notification popped up on the screen, displaying Haley's name. With a swift, practiced movement that barely caught the eye, Hudson slid the phone into his lap beneath the table. He read the text message from Haley, which thanked him warmly for the amazing lunch, praised his incredible kindness, and expressed how much she loved talking to him, ending with a request to do it again soon. She had dropped the formal Mr. Hudson and called him by his first name. Hudson felt his heartbeat faster, experiencing an intoxicating mix of illicit danger and thrill. While continuing to nod and smile at Sophia's stories about Italian vineyards, his thumbs quickly typed a response beneath the table, telling Haley she was welcome and promising he would always be there whenever she needed someone to talk to. He hit send, slipped the phone into his trouser pocket, and raised his glass of expensive wine to toast with Sophia, his smile just as warm as ever. Sophia happily clinked her glass against his, completely unaware that her husband had just opened the door to a dark double life. In the paradise they had built on wealth and mutual trust, the first hairline fracture had just formed, subtle, yet deep enough to eventually shatter everything. The changes in Hudson's behavior occurred gradually, seeping into their daily lives like an odorless, colorless poison. At first, it was minor habits that Sophia tried her best to rationalize. His smartphone, which used to sit carelessly on kitchen counters or coffee tables, was now permanently glued to his palm or tucked deep inside his pocket. He even took the device into the bathroom during showers. Whenever a call came in while they were relaxing together, Hudson would step away to the far corner of the room, speaking in hushed, formal tones that he casually brushed off as urgent corporate crises. Then the frequency of his late-night overtime sessions escalated dramatically. Nearly 3 times a week, Hudson would send a late-afternoon text message, apologizing that he had to stay at the office to finish critical marketing forecasts due the next morning. Sophia, deeply familiar with the crushing demands of the corporate world, would respond with supportive messages, offering to send their private driver to deliver a hot gourmet meal to his office. Strangely, Hudson consistently rejected these offers with various excuses, insisting he would just grab cheap takeout with his team. One evening, when Hudson returned home around 11, Sophia, who was still awake reading in bed, walked over to embrace him and caught a strange scent clinging to his shirt. It was not the high-end designer cologne he always wore, but the distinctly sweet, slightly cheap fragrance of women's drugstore perfume. Trying to keep her tone casual, she asked whose perfume was on his collar. Hudson stiffened for a fraction of a second, but quickly recovered his composure, smoothly, claiming it must belong to Sarah, a fellow marketing manager he had been locked in a cramped conference room with for hours. He stripped off his dress shirt immediately and tossed it into the laundry hamper, with a defensive haste that felt jarring. Sophia remained silent. Her logical mind accepted the explanation, but her gut instinct sent out a sharp warning. She was a woman who relied heavily on her intuition in boardroom negotiations, and right now, her intuition was screaming at her. Yet, unable to pinpoint the exact lie, she chose to trust her husband, dismissing the dark feeling as fatigue from her own grueling work schedule. After all, Hudson had been her rock for years. Her doubts ebbed and flowed like the tide. Some days she felt intense suspicion, but the very next morning Hudson would act exceptionally sweet, serving her breakfast in bed, or having a lavish floral arrangement delivered to her executive suite for no reason at all. Those affectionate displays acted as an antidote to her doubts, leaving her feeling deeply guilty for entertaining dark thoughts about her own husband. She convinced herself he was simply under heavy professional stress. The breaking point of her anxiety arrived at the end of the month, during her routine audit of their personal finances and American Express credit card statements. Her sharp eyes, trained to spot the slightest financial anomaly, froze on a single line item. It was a massive charge at an ultra-exclusive designer boutique on Fifth Avenue, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, enough to buy a reliable compact car. Sophia frowned deeply. She had no recollection of purchasing a handbag or designer dress from that boutique this month. Nor had she set foot inside that flagship store in half a year. That evening, she waited for Hudson in their master bedroom with a storm of conflicting emotions brewing inside her. She did not want to start an argument, she simply wanted logical clarification. As Hudson walked into the room, Sophia held up her tablet screen and asked in the lightest tone she could muster if he had spoiled her with another luxury Hermes bag without telling her, leaving plenty of room for him to explain. Hudson's facial muscles tensed for a split second. A look of sheer panic flashed across his eyes before being swiftly replaced by an awkward, sheepish grin. Acting as though a grand romantic plan had just been exposed, he slapped his forehead lightly, exclaiming that he had been caught red-handed. He claimed he had bought an exclusive handbag as a surprise present for her upcoming birthday next month because the store finally had the specific leather finish she loved. He apologized profusely for ruining his own surprise. The explanation sounded completely logical and undeniably sweet. Hudson even pulled her into a warm embrace, whispering playfully that she had spoiled the look of joy he was dying to see on her face. Sophia felt a massive wave of relief wash over her. All the accumulated suspicions evaporated instantly, replaced by a genuine sense of guilt for ruining his thoughtful gesture. She thanked him softly, returning his hug, and slept peacefully that night, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. However, the seed of doubt that had been planted did not completely die. A few days later, while reorganizing her extensive walk-in closet, she remembered Hudson's surprise gift. Driven by simple curiosity about which specific model he had secured, she began searching the storage shelves, checking inside decorative boxes, and scanning the upper storage closets where they kept off-season luggage. The handbag was nowhere to be found. She tried to calm herself by assuming he had locked it in his corporate office desk to keep it hidden. Yet, an unsettling knot formed in her stomach, growing stronger by the minute. That nagging anxiety drove her to do something she had never done in their entire marriage. She walked into Hudson's private home office on the ground floor. Her initial excuse to herself was that she was merely looking for a corporate tax document he might have brought home from the headquarters. But her gaze immediately locked onto a lower wooden desk drawer that was usually kept securely locked. Whether through sheer carelessness or rush, the drawer was unlatched today. Overcome by an irresistible urge to know the truth, Sophia pulled the drawer open. At first glance, it contained mundane corporate paperwork and old file folders. But as she lifted a stack of financial reports, she discovered a thin blue manila folder tucked neatly at the very bottom. She opened it. Inside were several miscellaneous paper receipts. Her breathing stopped entirely as she pulled out a specific automotive service receipt. It was an official invoice from an independent auto repair shop. Printed clearly at the top was the license plate number of her own prized possessions, her white luxury sports car. The date of the mechanical service was exactly 2 weeks ago. The precise Tuesday Hudson had explicitly told her he was flying out to Chicago for a mandatory regional client conference. What caused her blood to run ice cold was the address of the auto repair shop. It was located in a dingy, run-down industrial suburb, 40 miles outside the city. A terrifying connection snapped into place within her sharp mind. Several weeks prior, Hudson had casually mentioned his new marketing assistant, Haley, expressing sympathy over the fact that the poor girl lived in that exact, distant working-class town and faced a brutal commute every day. The dates did not align. The geographic location made zero sense. Why was her high-performance sports car being serviced at an obscure third-rate garage 40 feet away? On a day her husband was supposedly standing in a Chicago conference room. The intricate web of lies was now documented in black and white on a piece of paper trembling in her hand. Sophia sat frozen in Hudson's office chair, staring at the invoice. The warmth and absolute security that had defined her entire adult life shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Her paradise was a gilded cage built on deceit, and she had just found the first crack that revealed the rot underneath. Sophia did not confront Hudson when he walked through the front door that night. Her instinct, as a seasoned corporate executive who regularly navigated high-stakes, boardroom betrayals, took immediate control. She understood that exploding in emotional rage without tactical leverage would only result in a sloppy, messy conflict. She needed concrete data, irrefutable proof, and an unshakable strategic position before launching a counteroffensive. She carefully folded the automotive receipt, placed it back inside the blue folder, and returned it to the exact millimeter at the bottom of the drawer. She closed the wooden drawer silently and used her sleeve to wipe any residual fingerprints from the polished mahogany surface. There could not be a single clue that she had uncovered his betrayal. That evening, when Hudson returned home complaining about exhausting client negotiations, Sophia greeted him with her usual warm smile. The smile felt like a rigid plaster mask on her face, a performance she executed with flawless precision. She poured him a hot cup of tea, asked about his day, and quietly listened to his detailed fabrications about demanding executives and tedious slide presentations. Every word leaving Hudson's mouth sounded like the venomous hiss of a snake in Sophia's ears. She had to summon every ounce of her immense self-control to keep from throwing the scalding porcelain cup directly into his face. She played her role as the supportive, understanding wife to perfection. While the strategic gears in her mind spun at maximum speed, the initial suspicion sparked by the garage receipt grew exponentially, spreading like poisoned roots through her chest. She began observing every minute detail with forensic precision. The way Hudson consistently placed his phone face down on the dining table, the physical tension in his shoulders whenever she walked into a room during one of his calls, and the hollow, distracted look in his eyes during their conversations. Everything she had previously dismissed as corporate burnout was now blindingly obvious as the frantic anxiety of a cheating spouse. A few nights later, Hudson texted to say he would be coming home after midnight, claiming he had to host visiting investors from Tokyo at a downtown steakhouse. Sophia replied calmly, telling him to enjoy the dinner and get home safely. But once the house was silent, an intense restlessness consumed her. She needed answers. Her instincts pulled her toward one specific location, their newly completed secondary real estate property. That property was Sophia's ultimate architectural masterpiece, a sprawling two-story modern glass villa situated in the most exclusive, heavily guarded gated community in the state. She had purchased the plot and funded the multi-million-dollar construction entirely with her own personal dividends. Every single interior detail, from the imported Italian flooring to the custom crystal chandeliers, had been personally curated by her over the past 3 years. That villa was the ultimate symbol of her hard-won success, a dream sanctuary built for the future family and children she and Hudson had been actively planning to have. It was supposed to be completely vacant, pristine, and waiting for the day they officially moved in. With slightly trembling fingers, Sophia grabbed the keys to her secondary vehicle, a dark, understated luxury sedan she rarely drove. She navigated through the quiet, late-night suburban roads, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. She tried to tell herself she was being paranoid and acting like a hysterical woman. What did she honestly expect to find at a vacant construction site at midnight? Dark, empty corridors, yet her gut refused to let her turn the car around. The gated neighborhood was dead silent as she pulled onto the private cul-de-sac where her mansion stood. From several hundred yards away, she could see the striking silhouette of her modern villa under the moonlight. Then her heart seemed to stop completely. Glowing brightly from the second-floor master bedroom windows was a warm, ambient yellow light cutting through the pitch-black darkness of the property. A vacant, unsold home did not have lights running at midnight. Sophia parked her sedan in the dark shadows of a large oak tree several houses down and cut the engine. She sat there in the silence, her chest tightening painfully. Her logical brain desperately searched for benign explanations. Perhaps the neighborhood security patrol was doing an interior sweep, or perhaps an electrical timer had malfunctioned. But her business intuition, the exact same razor-sharp instinct that had built her empire, whispered a far more horrifying reality. After sitting frozen in the dark car for nearly 30 minutes, she saw a dark silhouette move across the illuminated master bedroom window. It was the unmistakable figure of a woman. That was all she needed to see. Sophia put the sedan in drive and returned to her primary residence with a heart turned to ice. She lay awake all night next to Hudson, who slipped into bed around 1:00 in the morning smelling of wine and instantly fell into a deep sleep. As she listened to his steady breathing, a cold, calculating hatred permanently solidified inside her soul. The following morning was execution day. Sophia waited patiently until Hudson dressed and left for the corporate office. She even played the devoted wife, preparing his espresso and straightening his silk tie at the door, a final act of domestic theater that made her stomach turn. The second Hudson sports car disappeared around the corner. Sophia mobilized. She did not drive to corporate headquarters. Her destination was singular, her newly built modern estate. She opened the towering security gates with her master remote and parked her sedan in the expansive multi-car garage. As she unlocked the heavy pivot front door with her master key, the air inside the house hit her instantly. It no longer smelled of fresh paint, polished timber, and clean construction. Instead, the air carried the stale scent of daily living, lingering cooking odors, cheap vanilla plug-in air fresheners, and the musty smell of closed windows. With deliberate, steady steps, she walked into the grand living room, the custom designer furniture, which was supposed to be wrapped in protective dust covers, was entirely exposed. Resting on her custom glass coffee table was a dirty, unwashed coffee mug and several tabloid fashion magazines. Sophia's heart rate accelerated, not from fear but from a volcanic rage boiling just beneath her calm surface. She walked through the state-of-the-art kitchen and saw empty noodle packets and crusty take-out containers spilling out of the stainless steel trash bin. Someone was undeniably living full-time in her dream home. Climbing the floating glass staircase to the second floor felt like lifting lead weights. Every single step confirmed the monumental betrayal she had endured. The heavy oak door to the master suite stood slightly ajar, emitting the faint murmur of a television speaker. Sophia pushed the door open completely. The scene before her was a personalized hell constructed specifically to mock her existence. Her custom king-sized platform bed, which she had left meticulously wrapped in protective plastic sheets, was now draped in tacky neon, pink floral bed sheets that looked like they belonged in a cheap motel. A tangled polyester blanket lay crumpled across the center. Mounted on the marble wall, the 80-in flat-screen television was powered on, broadcasting a mind-numbing morning soap opera to an empty room. Sophia walked deeper into the suite, scanning every inch of the desecrated space. On the marble nightstand sat an open, greasy bag of potato chips next to a framed digital photograph. She walked over and picked up the frame. Displayed on the screen was a snapshot of Hudson, grinning foolishly into the camera as if mocking her very existence. A sharp physical ache stabbed through her chest, making it difficult to draw breath. Yet, not a single tear fell from her eyes. Instead, from the ruins of her broken heart emerged an absolute terrifying clarity. Sophia was a born fighter. She had not conquered the male-dominated business world by weeping when a deal went sour. She faced problems head-on, engineered flawless strategies, and ensured she walked away the undisputed victor. She placed the digital photo frame back onto the nightstand with chilling precision. She pulled her smartphone from her purse. Not to call Hudson and scream hysterically, but to execute the most logical next step. She began documenting every square inch of the crime scene. She photographed the tacky pink sheets on her custom bed, the cheap rack of polyester dresses hanging inside her custom walk-in closet, the discount drugstore cosmetics littering her imported marble vanity, and the rotting takeout garbage in her kitchen. Every digital image was a bullet for her legal arsenal. Every photo was a nail in the coffin of her marriage. She moved through the house with the cold, detached efficiency of a forensic investigator gathering evidence at a homicide scene. Because in her mind, a murder had occurred here. The murder of her trust, her marriage, and her future. Once she finished, she locked the estate down completely, leaving no trace of her visit. She did not return home or go to her office. She drove her sedan straight to a high-end surveillance and corporate security electronics boutique in the city. She walked directly to the counter and purchased the most sophisticated surveillance gear legally available. A military-grade miniaturized GPS tracking beacon with a multi-month battery life, along with several voice-activated remote access audio listening devices. She sat inside her parked car for the next hour, thoroughly studying the technical manuals until she mastered the operation of every piece of equipment. Her next step required absolute precision. She made a phone call to a master automotive technician at her preferred luxury car dealership, a man whose loyalty and discretion she could easily secure with a substantial cash payment. For an exorbitant fee, she arranged for the technician to meet her privately in the underground parking garage of her corporate headquarters that very afternoon, while Hudson was sitting in a marketing department meeting upstairs. Sophia handed the technician the spare key fob to her white luxury sports car. She instructed him in a flat, authoritative voice to hardwire the tracking beacon and audio listening bugs deep beneath the dashboard console, where they could never be detected, ensuring they were synced directly to her smartphone application. Within 20 minutes, the covert installation was complete. Her prized sports car now possessed eyes and ears. That evening, a brutal new chapter began in Sophia's psychological warfare. She transformed into a silent observer. Whenever Hudson suspiciously grabbed his phone and stepped out onto the bedroom terrace to take a call, Sophia activated the live audio feed through her discreet wireless earbuds. The layer-by-layer dismantling of her husband's web of lies unfolded directly in her ears. The very first audio intercept made her stomach churn. It was Haley's voice sounding whiny, juvenile, and manipulative, complaining that she was bored and lonely, sitting all by herself in the big house and demanding to know when Hudson would come over. Then came Hudson's response. The exact same voice that had whispered words of adoration into Sophia's ear just hours earlier, now speaking with sickening tenderness and devotion. He told Haley to be patient, explaining that the dragon was currently working at home, so he couldn't sneak out, but promising he would rush over during tomorrow's lunch hour, and asking what gourmet takeout she wanted him to bring. The dragon. That was how the man she had lifted from obscurity referred to her behind her back, a monstrous beast guarding the gold hoard that he needed to trick and bypass. Sophia listened to the live stream with her fists clenched so tightly her manicured nails dug painfully into her palms. She listened to Haley complain that the central air conditioning was slightly too loud, followed by Hudson promising to dispatch a luxury HVAC team immediately. She listened to Haley complain about needing shopping money, and Hudson smoothly assuring her he would transfer extra spending cash to her account before noon. Every day brought a fresh dose of psychological torture, but Sophia absorbed every second of it. She watched the glowing red dot on her GPS tracking application move across the city map, observing how her sports car frequently parked near the cheap, dilapidated apartment complex where Haley used to live before Hudson generously relocated her into Sophia's multi-million-dollar estate. She pulled daily transaction logs from her personal credit cards and cross-referenced the timestamps with the audio conversations she intercepted. The lavish dinners at Manhattan steakhouses that Hudson claimed were mandatory corporate client negotiations were actually intimate romantic dates with Haley. The steep charges from high-end jewelers that Sophia assumed were gifts for his elderly mother were actually diamond pendants purchased for his mistress. Hudson had constructed an elaborate fantasy universe where he was a wealthy, powerful corporate titan rescuing a poor, helpless girl from poverty. He showered Haley with extreme luxuries he did not own, housed her in a mansion he did not build, and funded her extravagant new lifestyle with dollars he did not earn. Hudson was not merely an unfaithful husband, he was a literal parasite. Sophia listened to his daily betrayals. She no longer felt sadness. All that remained was absolute contempt. Hudson had not only betrayed her vows, he had severely underestimated her intelligence, as assuming she was far too busy and naive to ever uncover his pathetic double life. The ultimate turning point occurred late one evening while they were resting in bed. Sophia was calmly reviewing a digital manuscript on her tablet while Hudson played a mobile game on his phone. Suddenly, Hudson's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unsaved number, a clever tactic to conceal Haley's identity. Hudson sat up quickly, claiming it was an urgent dispatch from the Tokyo office, and stepping out onto the master terrace to take it. Sophia waited 5 seconds, casually slipped her wireless earbud into her left ear, and tapped the audio surveillance icon on her tablet screen. Haley's grating voice immediately flooded her ear, whining loudly that she was sick of being stuck indoors while all her old friends were posting summer beach photos online. She demanded that Hudson take her on a luxury weekend getaway to the Hamptons immediately. Sophia held her breath, waiting to seize just how far Hudson's delusion would stretch. Was there even a shred of sanity left in his mind? After a brief pause, She heard Hudson exhale deeply before replying in the tone of a benevolent king, ready to fulfill any wish. He told Haley to pack her designer bags, promising that he had everything covered with his magic card and that they would drive out to Long Island on Friday afternoon, inside our new sports car. Sophia's world completely stopped spinning. The magic card. That was Hudson's private nickname for Sophia's unlimited Black American Express card. And our new sports car was Sophia's own prized white Porsche. The betrayal had crossed into uncharted territory. Hudson was no longer simply borrowing her Reese's. He had mentally expropriated her personal property to share with his mistress. He had stripped Sophia of her crown and handed it directly to another woman. Sophia shut off the surveillance app. She stared through the glass terrace doors at the back of Hudson's head as he whispered sweet promises into the night, promising the moon and stars using currency stolen directly from his wife's bank accounts. At that exact moment, Sophia ceased looking at Hudson as her husband. She saw a hostile enemy target who had declared total war on her life. And in the arena of warfare, Sophia never lost. A flawless, devastating counter-strategy began assembling in her mind, cold, calculated, and entirely devoid of mercy. The morning following the intercepted Hamptons vacation plan, the atmosphere inside the mansion felt noticeably altered. Hudson, completely lost in his delusion of illicit romance, noticed nothing. But for Sophia, the surrounding air felt sharper, the light crisper. She stepped out of bed with a terrifying, serene calm. Every trace of emotional grief had vanished from her features, replaced by the stillness of a frozen Arctic lake. She performed her morning routine with mechanical perfection, pressing Hudson's dress shirt, brewing his espresso, and sitting across from him at the marble island. Hudson, utterly oblivious, interpreted her quiet demeanor as typical morning fatigue. He felt exceptionally confident, eager to initiate his illicit romantic weekend. Spreading imported jam across his toast, he casually announced that a sudden corporate emergency had just erupted in their Chicago regional branch. He claimed the primary distribution client was threatening to terminate their contract, requiring him to fly out immediately and spend 3 days managing the crisis on the ground. Sophia slowly raised her eyes from her porcelain teacup, locking her gaze directly onto her husband's face. She searched his eyes for a flicker of hesitation, a microscopic trace of marital guilt, but found nothing. His face was the perfect polished mask of a dedicated corporate executive. In a flat, measured voice, she commented on the suddenness of the trip. Hudson offered a fake apologetic sigh, claiming he had only received the briefing at dawn and expressing profound sorrow that they would have to cancel their quiet weekend together. Sophia nearly let out a bitter laugh, barely suppressing the sharp sound in her throat. Instead, she stood up gracefully, walked around the marble island, and gently adjusted the silk collar of his shirt. She told him not to worry, emphasizing that business always came first, and asking if he needed assistance packing his luggage. It was the ultimate performance, acting as the supportive, nurturing wife, helping her husband pack for a romantic getaway with his mistress, funded entirely by her bank account. Hudson smiled with visible relief. Thrilled that his deception had gone unchallenged, he declined her help, claiming he would throw a few suits into a carry-on bag himself. While Hudson hurried upstairs to pack designer clothes paid for by Sophia's corporate dividends, Sophia stepped into her ground-floor executive office. She did not make a single phone call. She simply typed out 2 brief directive text messages. The first message went to her executive assistant at corporate headquarters. "I will be working remotely from the estate for the next 3 days. Clear my schedule and cancel all non-essential administrative meetings immediately." The second text went directly to her lifelong best friend Rachel. "I need a major favor right now. Monitor a public Instagram account under the handle Haley. Alert me the exact second she posts an active story. This is life or death important." 30 minutes later, Hudson bounded down the staircase, holding a sleek carry-on bag. A bright, eager smile plastered across his face. He wrapped Sophia in a farewell embrace at the front door. promising to bring her back gourmet chocolates from Chicago, and telling her to take good care of herself while he was away. Sophia returned the physical embrace, though her body felt as rigid and cold as marble. She stepped back and watched him slide into the driver's seat of her white Porsche sports car, the vehicle she had bought with years of blood, sweat, and corporate triumphs. She offered a gentle wave as the sports car accelerated down the private driveway. A faint knowing smile lingered on her lips, but the millisecond the white bumper vanished past the security gates, that smile evaporated, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated ice. The hunt had officially commenced. Sophia did not waste a single second. She transformed her home office into a tactical command center. On her primary widescreen monitor, she launched the live GPS tracking software. A blinking red cursor mapped the real-time movement of her sports car. She watched the cursor with forensic focus. Instead of merging onto the highway heading west toward the international airport, the red dot veered sharply east, merging directly onto the Long Island Expressway, the direct arterial route leading out toward the luxurious beach resorts of the Hamptons. His lie was so transparent, so effortlessly debunked, it bordered on insulting. On her secondary monitor, she opened an array of social media monitoring tools. She sat back and waited. Her immense patience, honed over decades of grueling corporate merger negotiations, was now deployed to wait for her foolish enemy to make a fatal error. She understood the psychological makeup of women like Haley. A young woman desperately insecure, suddenly thrust into extreme luxury, would be physically incapable of resisting the urge to brag. The stolen glamour would feel entirely worthless to Haley if she couldn't broadcast it to the world to spark envy. It was not a matter of whether Haley would post online, but precisely when. The hours ticked by slowly. The red GPS cursor steadily tracked eastward across Long Island. Sophia calmly ordered a light salad, sipped her espresso, and let her mind run through dozens of tactical scenarios, calculating every potential variable to ensure her counterattack was absolute and watertight. Late that afternoon, her smartphone vibrated on the glass desk. An incoming text from Rachel contained a direct hyperlink and 4 urgent words. "Sophia, watch this now." With her pulse accelerating, Sophia tapped the URL. Haley's Instagram profile had suddenly switched from private to public. Her profile picture showed her smirking triumphantly into the camera. At the top of her profile, a glowing rainbow-colored ring indicating a freshly uploaded story pulsed like a neon distress beacon. Sophia took a slow, deep breath and tapped the story circle. What filled her screen was the single most violent psychological slap she had ever endured. The short video clip was filmed from the driver's seat of Sophia's own white Porsche. Haley's hand, wearing a cheap discount watch, rested arrogantly on the leather steering wheel. She wore oversized designer sunglasses that Sophia instantly recognized as her own limited edition pair, clearly stolen straight out of the car's glove compartment. The smartphone camera panned slowly to the right, capturing Hudson lounging in the passenger seat. He grinned like a lover-struck teenager, flashing a peace sign at the lens. The background showed the wide-open, sun-drenched lanes of the Long Island Expressway under a crystal blue summer sky. Yet, the visual footage was not the devastating blow. The true weapon was the caption overlaid across the video in sparkling pink cursive text. A toxic sentence aimed directly at Sophia's core to obliterate whatever marital dignity she had left. "Road trip to the Hamptons with my future hubby. The clueless sugar mama wife at home has no idea we're living the high life. The clueless sugar mama wife." Sophia read the stinging words over and over again. They leaped off the digital screen and struck her across the face. The insult was so blatant, so aggressively vulgar, and so intensely public. This was no longer an illicit, hidden workplace affair. This was an open declaration of war. Haley, emboldened and enabled entirely by Hudson, was not merely stealing Sophia's husband. She was publicly humiliating and ridiculing her before the entire digital world. Sophia downloaded the video file directly to her encrypted cloud server. She captured multiple high-resolution screenshots, locking the digital evidence safely, and she stared at the frozen screen one final time at Hudson's vacant, smiling face and Haley's arrogant caption. Her expression did not shift even a fraction of an inch. There was no theatrical explosion of rage, no muffled weeping into her hands. There was only a terrifying dead calm, the kind of absolute stillness that precedes a Category 5 hurricane. The point of no return had been officially crossed. She would conclude this game on her own terms. As the short video looped silently on her screen, something fundamentally permanent shifted inside Sophia's psyche. The agonizing pain that had felt like thousands of needles stabbing her chest solidified into a dense block of glacial ice. There was no remaining capacity for grief or marital nostalgia. All that remained was singular, razor-sharp purpose, the total absolute destruction of the two individuals who had dared to trample on her dignity. She did not scream or break a single piece of office glass. Her physical movements became remarkably measured and efficient. She stood up, walked to the gourmet kitchen, poured a tall glass of ice water, and drank it down in one steady draft. Returning to her command center, she recognized that the evidence-gathering phase had officially ended in a display of vulgar pride. The execution phase was now active. Her very first phone call, the most critical call of her life, was to her father, Arthur. Arthur was not a typical suburban retiree. He was a ruthless old-school industrial titan who had built a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire from nothing. He was a man forged from cast iron, possessing an unshakable moral code regarding family loyalty. He was Sophia's lifelong mentor, her ultimate protector, and the one human being on Earth she knew would never betray her. The line connected on the second ring. Arthur's deep, commanding voice answered simply. Sophia spoke his name, and instantly Arthur sensed the shift. He asked what was wrong, noting the strange lack of inflection in her voice. Without a quiver of emotion, Sophia spoke 4 plain words. Hudson betrayed our marriage. Silence hung over the line for several long seconds. Arthur asked no clarifying questions. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave, resonating with dangerous, lethal gravity. I am flying my helicopter down to the estate right now. Sophia instructed him to wait, explaining that she was transmitting a complete data file to his private email server. She told him to review the evidence before they spoke further. With rapid, practiced keystrokes, she compiled the lethal digital dossier. High-resolution photos of her desecrated modern estate, crisp audio files of Hudson and Haley mocking her, itemized credit card statements showing thousands spent on jewelry and fine dining, and finally, the video file of Haley's arrogant Instagram story. She labeled the subject line with a single word, evidence, and hit send. Less than 8 minutes later, her private line rang. It was Arthur. His voice trembled with a terrifying subterranean rage. That arrogant, parasitic bastard. Who the hell does he think he is, daring to humiliate my only daughter? The violent fury in her father's tone was palpable, a dormant volcano ready to erupt. He demanded to know what Sophia wanted done, offering to personally erase Hudson from the corporate world and run him out of the state within 24 hours. Sophia stared directly at the polished mahogany wall across her desk, her voice utterly devoid of warmth. I want far more than that, Dad. I refuse to let them quietly hide behind closed doors when their fantasy world collapses. I want them to experience their destruction in the most excruciatingly public way possible. I want to look into their eyes the exact second I rip their false masks off. I want a complete, inescapable public execution. She laid out her operational blueprint, a dramatic high-stakes intercept plan designed to offer zero mercy. She explained that she intended to ambush them directly on the interstate highway during their return drive from their illicit beach weekend. She promised to orchestrate a public spectacle that neither of them would ever live down. Rather than counseling restraint, Arthur let out a dark, approving hum to a self-made titan who operated entirely on respect and honor. A public humiliation required an even more catastrophic public reckoning. He endorsed the plan completely, insisting that he would personally lead the intercept team alongside her. He ordered her to feed him real-time GPS coordinates. promising they would arrange a welcome home party her husband would never forget. Having her father's absolute backing provided the final surge of tactical power Sophia required. Over the next 48 hours, Sophia and Arthur operated like an elite military intelligence unit, relying on the real-time GPS feed and Haley's incessant, boastful social media uploads, which continuously showcased expensive seafood dinners and beachfront yacht rentals. They tracked the couple's exact coordinates, minute by minute. They monitored their hotel checkout time, their departure from the resort town, and their entry back onto the westward lanes of the Long Island Expressway heading toward Manhattan. Sophia ran the spatial and mathematical variables with ruthless precision, calculating traffic density, average vehicle speed, and toll booth delays. She identified the precise mile marker and hour they would reach the outer suburban highway corridors on Sunday afternoon. When Sunday arrived, Sophia dressed for battle. She wore sharp black tailored trousers, a dark silk blouse, and authoritative leather designer boots. Her makeup was clean and minimal, emphasizing the piercing, icy sharpness of her eyes. She was no longer a grieving victim. She was the high executioner. A massive armored black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the front steps of her estate. Arthur stepped down from the passenger seat, his weathered face set like carved granite. Behind the Escalade idled a second black luxury SUV holding two towering, broad-shouldered corporate security operators, Arthur's most loyal, highly trained protective personnel. Arthur locked eyes with his daughter, asking softly if she was truly prepared for the fallout, warning her that once this line was crossed, their marriage was permanently dead. Sophia met his gaze with a cold, burning intensity her father had never witnessed in her before. The fierce look of a sovereign queen reclaiming her stolen throne. She told him she had never been more certain of anything in her entire life. She climbed into the front passenger seat of the Escalade, her smartphone mounted on the dashboard, displaying the glowing red dot traveling steadily westward along the highway map. Every rotation of their tires brought the two traders closer to the devastating reckoning they had authored. Sophia spoke clearly into the cabin, updating Arthur that the target vehicle had just cleared the eastern suburban corridor and would reach their designated ambush zone in approximately 45 minutes. Her voice was steady, her heart rate entirely normalized. Arthur simply nodded, his large, scarred hands resting heavily on his knees. They waited inside the idling Escalade parked at a secluded highway rest area, enveloped in thick, suffocating silence broken only by the distant roar of highway traffic. Finally, the glowing red cursor approached the target zone on the digital map. Arthur turned to look at Sophia one last time. Sophia kept her eyes glued to the screen, watching the exact intersection point draw near. She pointed toward a long narrowing curve on the interstate ahead, where construction concrete barriers funneled 4 lanes of traffic down to 2. She announced that the Porsche would enter that bottleneck in exactly 5 minutes, declaring that they would take them right there. Arthur signaled his driver with a sharp hand gesture. The massive V8 engine of the Escalade roared to life with a deep, menacing growl. The armored SUV surged out of the rest area, accelerating down the entrance ramp to merge into the westward highway traffic. The storm was no longer gathering on the horizon. The storm had officially arrived. Those 5 minutes stretched into an eternity. Inside the speeding Escalade, the tension was so dense that Sophia's slow, rhythmic breathing sounded like wind rushing through a cavern. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead on the narrowing concrete corridor. A mile up the road, cruising casually in the center lane, her prized white Porsche 911 rolled along under the afternoon sun, its occupants entirely oblivious to the fact that their reality was about to be torn apart. Inside the cabin, Hudson and Haley were likely laughing, sharing inside jokes, and coordinating their next web of lies while savoring the final moments of their stolen weekend. Sophia felt the vibrations of the Escalade's engine radiating through the floorboards, matching the relentless, pounding rhythm of her internal rage. Arthur announced softly that their secondary security vehicle was locked into position 300 YD behind the target. He looked at Sophia, giving her total executive control over the strike. Sophia gave a single firm nod, her gaze locked onto the rear bumper of her white Porsche just ahead. She uttered 2 words: "Execute now." The professional driver understood the directive instantly. He slammed the accelerator to the floorboards. The armored Escalade lunged forward like a massive bird of prey, cutting aggressively across 2 lanes of traffic with surgical precision. Within 3 seconds, the black beast was pulling directly alongside the white Porsche. Through the tinted side window, Sophia had a crystal-clear view into the sports car. Haley was leaning her head affectionately against Hudson's shoulder while Hudson steered with one hand, his face radiating smug, relaxed satisfaction. That visual image acted as the final catalyst, igniting the absolute totality of Sophia's wrath. Without warning, the Escalade's driver jerked the steering wheel sharply to the right, slicing directly in front of the Porsche's nose and stomped down on the anti-lock brakes. A violent, ear-splitting screech of burning rubber shattered the highway air as thick smoke erupted from the asphalt. Hudson, caught entirely off guard, panicked violently, shouting an expletive as he slammed his foot onto the brake pedal with all his physical strength. The sports car jolted to a violent, shuddering halt, its front bumper stopping mere inches from the heavy steel tow hitch of the Escalade. In that exact same second, Arthur's secondary SUV pulled up smoothly behind the Porsche, braking hard to seal the trap. The sports car was now completely boxed in between 2 armored vehicles inside a concrete construction bottleneck, leaving 0 room for escape. For 3 agonizing seconds, time stood completely still. Hudson and Haley sat frozen in their leather seats, paralyzed by extreme shock and confusion. Then the heavy doors of the front Escalade swung open. Sophia stepped out onto the highway asphalt. She moved with the predatory grace of a panther stalking trapped prey. Every step she took across the steaming summer pavement carried the massive weight of the humiliation she had endured over the past several months. A warm breeze caught her dark hair, and her eyes burned with an icy ferocity sharp enough to cut glass. Simultaneously, Arthur stepped out from the passenger side, standing tall and immovable like a fortress wall. His sheer physical presence radiated immense threat. Inside the trapped Porsche, raw terror flooded Hudson's face the moment he recognized his wife and father-in-law standing on the highway. Frantically, he slammed his palm onto the master door lock switch, securing all the locks, a pathetic, cowardly gesture that meant nothing. Sophia reached the passenger side door. She looked through the window directly at Haley, whose face had drained of all color, pale with raw, suffocating fear. Haley shrank back into the leather bucket seat, raising her hands defensively. Sophia uttered no words. She yanked on the locked exterior handle once, keeping her facial expression entirely blank. She glanced over her shoulder and gave a crisp, brief nod to the rear security vehicle. One of Arthur's broad-shouldered security specialists stepped forward instantly, holding a specialized automotive entry tool. With one rapid, highly trained motion, he jammed the mechanism into the window seal. A sharp, loud clack echoed across the highway as the electronic lock overrode and popped open. Sophia grabbed the handle and ripped the door open with terrifying force. The air inside the luxury cabin, previously filled with romantic laughter, instantly chilled with dread. In a low, lethal voice, Sophia issued a single command: "Get out." Haley shook her head frantically, sobbing openly and begging Sophia not to hurt her. Sophia's patience had expired completely. She leaned her upper body into the vehicle, plunged her hand into Haley's bleached, over-styled hair, and closed her fist into a vice grip. She yanked backward without a shred of physical mercy. Haley let out a piercing, hysterical scream of pure pain. A shriek so loud it echoed across the lanes, causing stalled motorists in the surrounding traffic jam to roll down windows and step out of their idling vehicles. Sophia ignored the growing audience completely. She dragged Haley forcibly out of the passenger seat, pulling her out of the car like someone yanking a poisonous weed out of a manicured flower bed. Hudson finally found his voice, screaming hysterically for Sophia to let her go and calling his wife insane. He shoved his driver's side door open to intervene. But before his foot could touch the asphalt, Arthur materialized right in front of him, slamming the heavy door back against Hudson's leg and looming over him. Arthur growled at him to stay seated, fixing Hudson with a murderous glare that caused the younger man to freeze in terror. Out on the highway, Sophia shoved Haley backward with intense physical force. Haley stumbled hard on the heels of her sandals and collapsed onto the rough, dirty asphalt. Her thin, expensive sundress rode up her thighs, exposing her to the growing crowd in an utter display of indignity. She sat on the pavement, weeping uncontrollably, shielding her face from the dozens of commuters who had now exited their vehicles. Smartphones were held high in the air, digital cameras recording every single second of the high society highway drama unfolding before them. Camera flashes flickered rapidly against the afternoon sun. This was precisely the stage Sophia had envisioned. This was her public audience. She calmly reached into her blazer pocket and produced her own smartphone. Holding her hand remarkably steady, she engaged the video recording application, pointing the high-definition lens directly at Haley's tear-stained, terrified face. Then she lifted her chin, throwing her voice across gridlocked highway lanes, clear, authoritative, and dripping with venomous triumph. "I want everyone here to pay very close attention," Sophia announced loudly, ensuring every recording smartphone caught her audio clearly. "This woman sitting in the dirt is named Haley. She is a cheap homewrecker who has been sleeping in my marital bed and living inside a multi-million-dollar home I built and paid for." She panned her smartphone camera smoothly to the left, framing Hudson, who stood trembling beside the driver's door while Arthur guarded him. "And this man is my cheating husband, Hudson, a pathetic corporate parasite who has been funding his mistress's entire luxury lifestyle using my personal bank accounts. They just returned from a lavish weekend getaway in the Hamptons, driving my Porsche and racking up tens of thousands of dollars on my American Express card." Sophia stepped back toward Haley, lowering her phone lens until it was inches from the weeping girl's face. Her voice dropped into a sharp, lethal hiss, designed specifically for Haley's ears. "And did you honestly believe I wouldn't see you calling me a clueless sugar mama wife on your public Instagram account? Take a good look around you right now. Haley, tell me who looks clueless now." The highway confrontation had reached its absolute apex. Murmurs, loud gasps, and shouted insults erupted from the crowd of stalled commuters, mixed with the aggressive blaring of car horns from drivers trapped in the massive backup. Sophia stood tall in the center of the chaotic highway scene, not as a broken, humiliated victim, but as the undisputed director of the play. She had successfully transformed her private marital humiliation into a massive public spectacle, guaranteeing that neither of her enemies would ever escape the digital footprint of their actions. The highway gridlock had transformed into an impromptu courtroom of public opinion, directed flawlessly by Sophia, surrounded by dozens of recording smartphones and hostile, glaring eyes. Hudson and Haley stood fully condemned. Sophia walked back and forth across the asphalt like a seasoned prosecutor, delivering an unshakable closing argument to a jury. Holding up her tablet screen to show commuters the screenshot of Haley's boastful Instagram post, she loudly detailed how Haley had publicly mocked her while living off her corporate dividends. The crowd grew increasingly vocal, shouting heckles and insults directed at Haley on the pavement in Hudson, who looked like he was about to faint from panic. Their social and professional reputations were systematically pulverized within 10 minutes, broadcast live across various digital networks. In the distance, the wailing sirens of state highway patrol cruisers, dispatched by Arthur's security team, reporting a vehicular blockage, echoed over the concrete walls, signaling that the curtain was about to fall on the performance. Sophia walked over to Hudson, locking eyes with him one final time. In his wide, panicked eyes, she saw zero genuine marital remorse. She saw only absolute terror regarding his impending financial and social ruin. That confirmation was all she needed. Reaching into her pocket, she retrieved her spare key fob to the white Porsche. She did not throw it at him in anger. She stepped up to him, held his gaze, and calmly dropped the key onto the oily pavement between their feet. The sharp, plastic clatter echoed clearly. Every single corporate asset, luxury privilege, and credit line you enjoy exists solely because of me, Sophia said, her voice dropping to Arctic temperatures. And as of this exact second, all of it is permanently revoked. You and your girlfriend can walk back to the city. Consider it your cardio for the day. Without casting a single glance over her shoulder, Sophia turned and walked back to the armored escalade. Arthur stood waiting by the open door, looking at his daughter with immense, overwhelming pride. They climbed inside, doors sealing shut with a heavy vault-like thud, and the escalade smoothly accelerated down the cleared shoulder lane, leaving the private hell they had constructed far behind. They left Hudson and Haley abandoned in the center of the Long Island Expressway, surrounded by a hostile, jeering crowd and flashing smartphone cameras, locked out of the luxury sports car. They could no longer enter. Their downfall did not wait for the morning news cycle. It occurred instantaneously before the escalade even exited the highway corridor. High-definition video clips filmed from multiple angles flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Hashtags like #HighwayHomewrecker and #ParasiteHusband dominated the national trending charts within an hour. Digital detectives quickly identified their full names, their corporate employer, and their professional backgrounds. Their faces were blasted across tabloid gossip blogs, corporate industry forums, and local news websites. A relentless tidal wave of digital humiliation crashed over them. Upon returning to her primary estate, Sophia did not rest. Riding a wave of pure tactical adrenaline, she walked straight into her home office and dialed the personal cell phone of her senior wealth manager at JP Chase. She identified herself calmly and issued a direct order. I need you to freeze, cancel, and terminate every single credit card, debit card, and joint checking account linked to Hudson immediately. Cancel all authorized user cards, across all accounts right this second. Do not ask questions, execute. The private banker complied instantly. Within 2 minutes, Hudson's magic card was transformed into a worthless piece of plastic. Next, Sophia dialed a Premier 24, our residential security and locksmith service. She instructed them to dispatch their top master technicians to her estate immediately to replace every exterior lock, recode the security gate access pads, and reprogram the garage entry codes. While waiting for the security contractors to arrive, Sophia engaged in the most deeply satisfying task of the day. Assisted by her loyal housekeeper and private driver, she marched into the master suite and systematically emptied every closet and dresser drawer containing Hudson's possessions. Tailored Italian designer suits, expensive leather dress shoes, luxury wristwatches, imported cologne, financial books, and framed couple photographs. Everything was gathered without discrimination. They did not pack his things into suitcases or neat moving boxes. Everything was dumped unceremoniously into heavy-duty black contractor trash bags. It was a physical manifestation of her mental reality. His entire existence in her life was now garbage that needed to be hauled to the curb. By midnight, the purge was complete. Over 24 heavy black trash bags, containing every material trace of Hudson's life, sat piled haphazardly on the public sidewalk just outside the estate's newly secured iron drive gates. A short time later, a city taxi pulled up to the curb. Hudson stepped out into the humid night air, looking disheveled, exhausted, and utterly defeated. He had spent the entire evening suffering through police questioning on the highway, scrambling to find transportation back to Westchester. He walked up to the pedestrian entry gate and reached into his pocket for his brass key. He inserted it into the lock cylinder, but it refused to turn. Panic setting in, he tried jiggling the mechanism repeatedly. It was entirely jammed. He began rattling the heavy iron gates, shouting Sophia's name toward the dark mansion. The house remained dead silent. In absolute desperation, he pulled out his smartphone with its dwindling battery life and dialed Sophia's direct line. Upstairs in the master bedroom, Sophia stood by the window, staring down at the glowing screen of her phone displaying Hudson's name. She looked through the glass down at the pathetic figure of her husband, pacing helplessly outside the iron gates. With icy composure, she swiped the green icon to connect the call. "Sophia, please God, open the gate. We have to talk about this inside. I can explain everything to you." Hudson's voice crackled through the speaker, hysterical and begging. Sophia uttered not a single syllable. She listened to his desperate pleading for 5 silent seconds. Then, using her index finger, she firmly tapped the red button to terminate the call. Click. That severed connection was the only explanation Hudson would ever receive. At that exact moment, as if the universe itself had aligned to deliver the final verdict, the humid summer sky broke open. A massive torrential downpour erupted over the suburb. Heavy rain sheets pounded down on Hudson, soaking through his clothes within seconds. He stood freezing in the downpour, staring hopelessly at the massive pile of black contractor bags containing his ruined life, which were now pooling with rainwater on the concrete curb. He was locked out of his castle, devoid of finances, stripped of his professional dignity, and left entirely without a home. His absolute destruction had unfolded in less than 12 hours. It was brutal, efficient, and complete. He had lost his entire world in a single day. The torrential rain felt like a heavy curtain dropping on the luxury chapter of Hudson's existence. Standing drenched outside the towering gates of the estate he once called home, he was the literal image of a deposed monarch stripped of his crown. That dropped phone call was his final sentencing. After standing in the freezing downpour for an hour that felt like a lifetime, a private neighborhood security patrol vehicle pulled up with its amber lights flashing. 2 armed security officers stepped out and informed him politely but firmly that Miss Sophia had requested complete privacy, ordering him to vacate the residential curb immediately or face immediate arrest for loitering and trespassing. Shoulders slumped, Hudson dragged his soaked body away from the property, leaving his ruined possessions behind in the rain. He had no viable options remaining. He carried only his wallet and a smartphone showing a 3% battery warning. His credit and debit cards had been declined by the taxi driver earlier, forcing him to empty his last physical cash to pay the fare. With his remaining dollars gone, he was forced to walk 2 miles through the rain to a 24-hour public bus stop, riding a late-night commuter bus toward the only destination he could think of, Haley's old, low-rent apartment complex on the outer edge of the city. He prayed silently that she had returned there, or that the property manager might allow him to crash in a vacant utility closet for the night. However, bad luck clung to him like a second skin. When he arrived at the dingy apartment building dripping wet at 3:30 in the morning, the aggressive property manager recognized him immediately from the viral highway videos broadcast on the local midnight news. She stepped out of her ground floor office holding a wooden baseball bat, screaming at him to get off her property and refusing to let her building become a haven for internet-famous adulterers and con artists. Hudson was forcibly evicted from a property for the second time in a single night. Across the city, Haley was experiencing an equally catastrophic reality. After being left behind on the Long Island Expressway, she managed to hitch a ride from a sympathetic trucker back to the city, heading straight for Sophia's newly constructed luxury estate where she had been living. When she arrived, she found every door dead-bolted and the security access codes completely wiped. She banged frantically against the glass pivot doors like a mad woman until neighbors alerted private community. 2 guards arrived, physically escorted her out of the gated community, and warned her never to return. Peniles, homeless, and terrified, she spent the night huddled on a cold wooden bench inside the Port Authority bus terminal, enduring relentless mocking whispers and cell phone recordings from late-night commuters who recognized her viral face. The following morning marked the beginning of their true long-term nightmare. Both of their smartphones began buzzing relentlessly as soon as they found public charging stations. The notifications were not supportive messages from family. They were automated alerts from corporate news aggregators, vicious direct messages from strangers across America, and viral video tags. By 9 precisely, an official corporate email from the Human Resources Department of Sophia's enterprise landed in both of their inboxes. The message was legally brief and absolutely devastating. Immediate termination of employment for gross misconduct, breach of moral conduct clauses, and severe reputational damage to the corporate brand. In a single keystroke, they lost not only their social standing, but their sole means of financial survival. Later that afternoon, desperate and destitute, Hudson and Haley finally managed to locate each other after coordinating over email at a public library. They met inside a greasy, run-down fast food diner on the outskirts of Queens. There was no remaining trace of illicit romance between them. No sweet nicknames, no hand-holding. There were only two broken, ruined individuals looking for someone to blame. "This is 100% your fault," Hudson snarled across the sticky laminate table, his face haggard and unshaven. "If your pathetic ego hadn't forced you to post that stupid video on Instagram, we would still be living comfortably. You destroyed my entire life. Your fault." Haley shrieked back at him, her eyes swollen and red from crying all night. "You were the one who promised me the world. You bragged every day that you had everything under control. You told me your wife was a clueless idiot who would never find out. You're the real idiot, Hudson." Their vicious, screaming argument echoed through the cheap diner, providing free entertainment for the working-class patrons around them. The illicit relationship, built entirely on a foundation of stolen luxury and deceit, collapsed the very second the money evaporated. Stripped of the designer clothes, gourmet dinners, and sports cars, nothing remained between them except toxic resentment and bitter regret. Pooling the meager spare change they had left in their pockets, they managed to sublet a cramped, mold-infested, single-room basement studio in one of the most dilapidated neighborhoods in the city. That tiny damp room became their shared prison, a place where they spent their miserable days arguing, weeping, and blaming each other for the total obliteration of their lives. Meanwhile, Sophia moved forward with the unstoppable momentum of a freight train. Exactly 7 days after the highway ambush, a process server delivered a thick manila envelope to the door of Hudson's moldy basement studio. Inside was a formal petition for divorce filed in the New York State Supreme Court, accompanied by a comprehensive emergency asset freeze order. Hudson tore open the documents with trembling fingers, praying desperately that her legal team had left some small loophole or financial settlement he could survive on. His final hopes were crushed instantly. Sophia had retained the most ruthless, aggressive, matrimonial litigator in Manhattan. The filings were legally impenetrable. Attached to the petition was a mountain of exhibit evidence. Forensic accounting ledgers proving Hudson's unauthorized diversion of marital funds, photographic evidence of his infidelity, and transcribed audio recordings of his plans to defraud his wife. Most devastating of all was the ironclad prenuptial agreement Hudson had signed years ago, which he had smugly dismissed at the time as mere legal formality. That document explicitly dictated that any premarital assets, corporate shares, real estate acquisitions, and business dividends accumulated during the marriage remained the sole unencumbered property of Sophia. Hudson had zero legal claim to a single dollar. The estate, the secondary modern villa, the sports cars, the corporate holdings, and the investment accounts remained entirely in Sophia's name. Hudson was exiting the marriage in the exact same financial condition he had entered it, completely penniless. To add insult to injury, the petition demanded legal restitution, suing Hudson for the return of the tens of thousands of dollars he had illegally charged to Sophia's corporate cards to fund Haley's lifestyle, a financial debt he could never hope to pay off in his lifetime. Hudson collapsed onto the dirty linoleum floor of the basement studio, letting the legal papers scatter around him. He had officially hit absolute rock bottom. He possessed nothing. In a moment of sheer, desperate panic, His eyes landed on the only valuable possession remaining on his person, a luxury limited edition Swiss wristwatch that Sophia had gifted him on their second wedding anniversary. It was the final remaining symbol of his former high society status. Clutching the watch like a life raft, he rode the subway to Manhattan's Diamond District. Walking into an elite high-end horological pawnshop, he desperately needed cash to buy groceries and pay the basement rent. The master jeweler placed a jeweler's loupe to his eye and examined the intricate movement of the timepiece for several agonizing minutes. Finally, the jeweler set the watch back down on the velvet appraisal pad and offered a polite, sympathetic smile. "I apologize, sir, but we cannot make an offer on this piece," the jeweler explained softly. "What are you talking about? That is an authentic Swiss masterpiece worth $20,000. Hudson protested wildly. The jeweler shook his head gently. "To the untrained eye, the exterior casing is exceptional, sir, but opening the case back reveals this is a high-grade master replica. The internal mechanical movement is manufactured in Asia, not Switzerland. It is a brilliant counterfeit, but ultimately it possesses zero monetary resale value." The floor seemed to drop out from beneath Hudson's feet for the final time. He stared down at the watch with hollow, glassy eyes. Even during the absolute peak of their romantic honeymoon phase, Sophia had never fully trusted him. She had gifted him an elaborate, convincing counterfeit, a symbol of wealth that allowed him to show off to his peers while protecting her actual financial capital. Sophia had always operated 10 moves ahead on the chessboard. She wasn't simply a wealthy businesswoman. She was a grandmaster of strategy. Hudson realized he had been nothing more than a minor pawn who had just been placed in permanent checkmate. He let out a dry, broken, hysterical laugh that bounced off the glass display cases of the pawn shop. He had lost his career, his marriage, his home, and his reputation. Even the proud illusions of his past success were revealed to be entirely fake. 6 months flew by, bringing a change of seasons and a complete metamorphosis in Sophia's world. She had chopped her dark hair into a sleek, razor-sharp, modern bob that highlighted her high cheekbones and projected absolute executive authority. Her divorce from Hudson was finalized swiftly by the courts. She had demanded zero financial damages from her ex-husband because she knew he had nothing left to give. She sought only the formal restoration of her maiden name and total legal freedom, both of which the judge granted without hesitation. She turned her attention to the secondary modern glass estate that had been tainted by Hudson's infidelity. Rather than selling it, she chose to reclaim it entirely. She ordered her team to strip every square inch of furniture, bedding, and fixtures that Haley had touched, donating the items to local women's shelters. She hired Manhattan's top architectural interior firm to execute a gut renovation of the residence. The previous neutral tones were replaced with a striking, sophisticated minimalist aesthetic dominated by crisp whites, warm architectural concrete, brushed gold accents, and floor-to-ceiling glass. The property was transformed into a stunning reflection of her own internal character. Resilient, elegant, and flooded with natural light, she moved her primary residence to the new estate, converting a site of traumatic betrayal into her personal palace of triumph. Her corporate empire experienced explosive growth. Freed from the emotional drain and underlying anxiety of managing a parasitic sarked partner, Sophia poured her laser-sharp focus entirely into her business. She engineered 2 major brand acquisitions that dominated the market, driving her enterprise's valuation to historic highs. She was no longer viewed simply as a successful female executive. She was celebrated across national media as an icon of female empowerment and corporate leadership. Her personal journey from surviving a highly publicized marital betrayal to achieving unprecedented boardroom success became an inspiring case study. She was regularly invited to deliver keynote addresses at global women's leadership summits, sharing her philosophy on resilience without ever uttering her ex-husband's name, empowering thousands of women navigating personal crisis. She wasn't actively searching for romantic love, but her heart was peaceful, secure, and surrounded by loyal friends and a supportive family. She had fought through the fire and emerged with unshakable inner peace. One crisp, sunlit Sunday afternoon, Sophia relaxed on the expansive teak terrace of her new modern estate. Holding a delicate porcelain cup of warm jasmine tea, she looked out over her newly landscaped grounds, where a custom koi pond trickled soothingly against imported river stones. She casually swiped through her iPad, scanning digital news outlets to catch up on weekend headlines. While scrolling through a regional metropolitan news portal, her attention was caught by a minor headline buried in the local crime bladder section. Unemployed couple arrested in low-level wire fraud scheme. Prompted by mild curiosity, she tapped the hyperlink. The brief article detailed how local law enforcement had arrested a man and woman operating out of a dilapidated outer borough motel for defrauding elderly pensioners through a fake telephone investment scam. The total financial theft was minimal, barely enough to cover 2 months of rent, indicating that the perpetrators were desperate amateur criminals operating at the absolute bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. What made Sophia pause, her teacup hovering midair, was the police booking photograph embedded directly beneath the headline. Staring out from the digital screen were the harsh, unedited mugshots of Hudson and Haley. Their physical deterioration was shocking, a monumental contrast to the polished glamour they had attempted to project 6 months prior. Hudson looked 15 years older. His face was gaunt and covered in graying, patchy stubble, and dark hollow circles framed his dead, exhausted eyes. He wore a stained, stretched-out gray sweatshirt. Every drop of his former corporate arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the broken stare of a man completely crushed by life. Beside him, Haley looked even more tragic. Her face, previously masked in heavy layers of cosmetics, appeared sallow, prematurely aged, and pitted with stress breakouts. Her bleached blonde hair hung in stringy unwashed clumps, showing 4 in of dark greasy roots. She kept her chin tucked toward her chest, her eyes staring blankly at the floor in absolute defeat. Standing side by side against the cinder block wall of the precinct booking room, they looked like 2 exhausted transients bound together, not by romantic affection, but by shared misery and the toxic fallout of their own poor choices. Sophia studied the booking photograph for several minutes. She felt no sudden rush of vindictive rage, nor did she feel an overwhelming surge of malicious joy. What washed over her was a profound, grounding sense of stillness, a quiet, absolute closure to the darkest chapter of her life. She realized that universal justice did not require active pursuit or ongoing vengeance. When left alone, universal balance executed itself quietly, efficiently, and always on time. She pressed the lock button on her iPad and set it gently onto the teak side table. She did not screenshot the article. She did not forward the link to Rachel or mention it to her father. It belonged entirely to the past. Her former enemies had successfully destroyed themselves, falling helplessly into the exact pit they had attempted to dig for her. Sophia leaned back into her comfortable designer outdoor chase lounge, letting her shoulders drop as she took a slow sip of her warm jasmine tea. Her eyes drifted toward the western horizon, where a magnificent autumn sunset was painting the suburban sky in vibrant shades of gold, amber, and deep violet. A gentle, genuine smile graced her lips. Not the arrogant smirk of a conqueror, but the serene smile of a survivor who had weathered a Category 5 storm and navigated safely into calm, sunlit waters. She had successfully reclaimed her crown. It was not merely a crown forged from corporate wealth, real estate holdings, or financial power. It was a far more valuable diadem, the crown of her self-respect, her emotional autonomy, and absolute mastery over her own destiny. As the golden twilight washed over her estate, Sophia took a deep breath of clean, crisp air, knowing with absolute certainty that the most brilliant chapter of her life was just beginning to unfold. 5 years is a substantial expanse of time, more than enough time to heal the deepest emotional fractures. rebuild shattered foundations into indestructible fortresses, and for some, reap the ultimate harvest of the seeds they chose to plant. On a crisp autumn evening, the grand ballroom of Manhattan's premier five-star hotel shimmered beneath the glow of massive tiered, bohemian crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of distinguished guests, comprising the city's corporate elite, civic leaders, and high society philanthropists mingled in bespoke tuxedos and haute couture evening gowns. The gathering was the annual charity gala hosted by the Sophia Foundation, a philanthropic organization established by Sophia 5 years prior to provide full university scholarships for underprivileged youth and comprehensive startup grants for domestic abuse survivors. Within half a decade, the foundation had transformed into one of the most impactful charitable entities on the East Coast, standing as tangible proof that Sophia's immense corporate wealth was leveraged to elevate those around her. Standing at the center podium on the elevated stage, Sophia radiated an aura of calm, undisputed sovereignty. Her dark hair, cut short during the tumultuous days of her divorce, now cascaded in long, elegant waves over her shoulders. She wore a tailored midnight blue silk evening gown that projected timeless grace and commanding authority. The old traces of emotional vulnerability and hardened defensive armor had vanished entirely from her expression, replaced by profound wisdom, emotional equilibrium, and a genuine lasting happiness. Every single one of us in this room will encounter brutal storms during our lifetime. Sophia spoke into the microphone, her clear, resonant voice captivating the silent ballroom. Yet, a storm is never the end of our narrative. Storms arrive to test the structural integrity of our roots. They sweep away the dead branches, clear the atmosphere, and leave behind clean air and fertile ground, giving us the opportunity to rebuild something far stronger, more beautiful, and entirely authentic. This foundation stands as living proof that even from the deepest wreckage, we possess the power to cultivate a thriving sanctuary of hope. Thunderous applause erupted across the ballroom. Sitting in the center front row, Arthur watched his daughter with glistening eyes, swelling with an indescribable fierce pride. Seated directly beside the old industrial titan was Alex, a celebrated architectural engineer and Sophia's husband of 2 years. Alex was a man of quiet confidence and immense intellect, whom Sophia had met during the design phase of her corporate headquarters expansion. Their relationship had not materialized out of codependency or emotional rescue. It was a rare, authentic partnership forged between two absolute equals. Alex was never intimidated by Sophia's massive personal fortune or her powerful boardroom persona. Instead, he deeply admired her intellectual brilliance and fierce resilience. He cherished Sophia for the woman she was at her core, providing a steady, peaceful harbor after her years spent navigating turbulent waters. As the formal remarks concluded, Sophia stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward her family. Alex rose to meet her, taking her hands in his and pressing a warm kiss to her cheek. He whispered how breathtaking her speech was, and Sophia smiled brightly, replying that she had the world's best daily inspiration to draw from. Her gaze shifted softly to a nearby table where their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, slumbered peacefully in the arms of her private nanny. Lily's birth had been the ultimate completion of Sophia's world. The toddler's bright, echoing laughter had permanently erased every lingering ghost from their glass estate, transforming the house into a true love-filled family home. During the post-dinner cocktail reception, Rachel pulled Sophia aside toward a quiet balcony overlooking the city's skyline, her expression a mix of hesitation and disbelief. She leaned in close, telling Sophia she wouldn't believe who she had encountered earlier that afternoon while running errands in a gritty, industrial section of Queens. Sophia sipped her sparkling water, her face entirely composed as she asked who it was. Rachel uttered Hudson's name, that too-global word, which years ago possessed the power to trigger adrenaline and heartbreak, now registered in Sophia's mind, with complete neutrality sounding as distant and irrelevant as a minor character from a novel she had read decades ago. She calmly asked Rachel where she had seen him. Rachel took a breath, explaining that she had stopped at a run-down bodega near a body shop when a violent argument broke out on the street. She described watching an emaciated, prematurely aged man, wearing greasy work clothes and sporting a cheap, faded tattoo on his forearm, aggressively screaming at the bodega owner over a past-due debt. She noted that he looked 20 years older than his actual age, his hairline receding, his face sunken, and his eyes darting around with frantic anxiety. It wasn't until local bystanders shouted his name that Rachel recognized him. Hudson was now scraping by as a low-level muscle and debt collector for an illegal neighborhood loan shark. Sophia digested the information in silence. The visual memory of the polished colleague corporate manager sitting at her marble kitchen island was permanently overwritten by the reality of a desperate street thug enforcing predatory loans in alleyways. It was a staggering, tragic fall from grace. Keeping her tone conversational, Sophia inquired if Rachel knew whatever became of Haley, not out of lingering resentment, but simply to close the historical ledger once and for all. Rachel shook her head, explaining that according to mutual acquaintances from their old hometown, the couple's relationship imploded violently shortly after they served brief jail sentences for their wire fraud arrest. Haley had apparently tried to launch a career as a nightclub vocalist in sleazy dive bars across northern New Jersey, but failed entirely. The last confirmed sighting of her was working the graveyard shift as a waitress at a dingy 24-hour truck stop diner along Interstate 95. Commuters and truck drivers still occasionally recognized her face from the legendary highway confrontation video that continuously circulated on social media platforms, subjecting her to daily harassment and ridicule. Her former youth and artificial glamour had completely evaporated, leaving her worn down by the brutal realities of her survival. Sophia offered a slow, measured nod. There was no internal celebration, no gloating, and no lingering pity. There was only a vast, unbridgeable distance. Those two individuals existed in a completely separate universe from her own paths that would never cross again. They had consciously chosen their trajectory, grasping for unearned wealth and illicit shortcuts, only to discover that those shortcuts led directly over a precipice. Sophia had never needed to lift a finger to punish them. They had been executed entirely by the flaws in their own character. She turned her gaze away from the city lights, looking back through the glass balcony doors toward Alex, who was now holding a freshly awakened Lily in his arms, smiling warmly as the little girl rubbed her eyes. Sophia murmured softly to Rachel that her past no longer held any real estate in her present. Later that night, after the charity gala concluded, and they returned to their suburban estate, Sophia stepped out onto the private master balcony. Alex walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin gently on her shoulder. Below them, the estate grounds bathed in soft landscape lighting, the koi pond reflecting the clear, starlit Connecticut sky. Alex softly asked if hearing about Hudson's fate earlier had bothered her at all. Sophia leaned back into her husband's embrace, turning her head to kiss his jawline. She smiled peacefully, assuring him that she felt completely whole. She explained to Alex that 5 years ago, during the absolute height of the trauma, she genuinely believed that the crowns stolen from her consisted of her luxury cars, her bank accounts, and her real estate properties. She admitted she had fought with ruthless aggression to reclaim those material items, only to realize later that they were simply decorative armor. Turning around in his arms, she placed her palm gently over her own heart. She looked deeply into Alex's eyes, explaining that the true crown was what lived inside. Unshakable dignity, emotional peace, the ability to rest without anxiety at night, and the capacity to construct a life built entirely upon genuine truth and mutual respect. That internal sovereignty, she smiled softly, was a crown no thief on earth could ever strip away. Alex pulled her close, pressing a tender, lasting kiss to her forehead. Standing beneath the quiet canopy of autumn stars, inside the architectural masterpiece she had reclaimed and purified from the wreckage of Betrayal, Sophia understood the totality of her journey. She had not merely won a street fight against those who wronged her. She had successfully conquered and secured her entire kingdom, a realm defined by authentic love, truth, and inner strength. Hudson and Haley had once attempted to steal the glittering jewels from her life, but they had never possessed the capacity to touch her actual throne. Because that throne was not constructed from marble, gold, or corporate dividends. It was forged from the indestructible resilience of a woman who refused to be broken, and seated firmly upon that throne. Sophia would rule the remainder of her days enveloped in lasting peace, absolute dignity, and enduring joy.